Well, let's discuss the effectiveness of the APRM with Jeggan Grey-Johnson, the Open Society Foundation's Africa Governance Monitoring and Advocacy Project lead. Jeggan, good evening to you and welcome. I guess let's start at the obvious point, which is you were able to listen to Prof. Maloka there, almost wax evangelical about the possibility of mobilizing some African countries to join the fold, almost as if they don't know the APRM exists. What do you think?
I think in terms of the levels of enthusiasm that Professor Eddie Maloka has shown, it's a positive thing in the sense that he is the CEO of the mechanism. It's a pity that other heads of state aren't as enthusiastic, but I think certainly the finding of ignorance is absolutely no excuse whatsoever. The APRM is the primary governance instrument on the African continent. It's been around at least for 2 decades now. So any head of state that tries to find ignorance and says that, well, we didn't know about, or we didn't know that, we should have joined earlier, is a bit disingenuous.
At the end of these exhaustive engagements at the APRM, and they certainly covered a range of discussions, what would you count as progress in how they work and how they are credibly able to get the participation of member and other states to see it as an opportunity to look into themselves, examine themselves and do better?
Yeah, you're right that the APRM is actually, the mirror of society. I mean, when this mechanism or idea was first touted, the idea would be, again, first of all, is the peer-to-peer learning. Secondly, it's voluntary. Thirdly, it would be a platform whereby issues around transparency, accountability, good governance, sound democratic practice, citizenry-driven processes would be elevated across the African continent. I think it has to be said, Iman, that, certainly the first 5-7 years, certainly maybe 10 years of the APRM, they've been actually a victim of their own success. Heads of state that, volunteered and acceded to the APRM and underwent a report. A great many of them didn't like what the report stated. And the interesting thing is that it is not being invented by outsiders. It is what citizens feel about the country, right? Whether it's the national whether it's the self-assessment reports, which is the first stage, right the way to the national programs of action, which is the NPOAs, the final stage. Heads of state were basically seeing themselves in not a favorable light, and that was a true reflection of the way the citizens thought about the way they were being governed. So as a result, I think that has basically caused some AU member states and heads of state to shy away from the process, to delay the process, to delay their reviews themselves. And when the reviews do come out, they're basically sat on the reports.
So that's, that's one side of things. The other side is, in terms of evaluating its effectiveness, is to see where it is in the context of conflicts, why is the deployment of the APR mechanism probably the most practical process to transition a country from military to civilian rule? And we see this happening in many countries across the continent where there would be coups or unconstitutional changes of government. You don't always hear, the APRM as an immediate mechanism that's in there trying to help.
Yeah, you're right. The APRM also, a lot of people tend to forget, is supposed to be a tool for an early warning mechanism. By virtue of the fact that once the country review reports have been done, the recommendations and the concerns are highlighted. And the interesting thing is, again, for every single country that has undergone a review, the warning signs and the red flags were always there. In Mali, it warned against the marginalization in the north, etc. So that's the one thing. But just to say that the early warning system has failed because heads of state just haven't paid attention. But that does not mean that the APRM has actually outlived its usefulness, precisely because of the fact that if we are now experiencing, which we are, the high levels of coups d'etats and entrenched military juntas, particularly in West Africa, the next phase of that is the transition from military to civilian. And that is largely a process that is citizenry driven. It involves constitutional making, and the APRM is tailor-made to basically address some of these things. Much more given the fact that every single country from Burkina Faso, Gabon, Chad, Mali, Niger, Sudan, all of them have actually undergone a country review. So as a result, I think it would be, strategic and would not be too difficult for the APRM to find itself in terms of these particular transitions that are extremely protracted and very difficult, and proving that the regional economic communities are finding it hard to deal with.
Jeggan, thanks for clarity and for helping us to understand APRM and its potential, particularly in conflict resolution, a little bit better. Jeggan Grey-Johnson from the Open Society Foundation, Africa's Governance, Monitoring and Advocacy Project. Thank you.